The company inheritance will go to real blood, not honorary guests, Aunt Linda declared with a half-laugh and a lift of her crystal wineglass, the ruby liquid catching the overhead light. Her voice sliced through the casual conversation around the Thanksgiving table in Austin, Texas. No one dared to speak. A few cleared their throats. I heard a fork clink against a porcelain plate, then silence. Linda's eyes scanned the table slowly, searching for consensus like a politician mid-speech. Callahan Industries has always been in the hands of real Callahans. And that's how it will stay. My cousin Erin nodded proudly from across the table while her brother Nathan offered a small smile and a sip of his wine. Uncle Todd gave a small grunt of agreement, his eyes still fixed on his plate. Even my adoptive parents, seated beside me, Cynthia and Mark, kept their expressions neutral. They'd raised me with kindness, gave me a roof, education, a sense of belonging. But they said nothing now. My name is Rachel Blake. I'm 28 years old, and for the past 2 decades, I've quietly attended every Callahan holiday dinner, smiled through gritted teeth, and learned the precise art of being visible but non-threatening. I raised my glass of sparkling apple cider and returned Linda's gaze with a smile as delicate as it was detached. They didn't know. Not yet. Linda pressed on, voice sharp and confident. I mean, we can't have just anyone assuming they're entitled to what generations of Callahans have sacrificed to build. Her eyes landed on me, just briefly, but with purpose. Like a slap disguised as a handshake. I hope everyone understands their place, she added. The smile she wore was so fake it could have been factory-made. I felt the old familiar pang rise in my chest, that low hum of being almost family. That quiet footnote appended to every invitation, every photo, every holiday gathering. Adopted. Tolerated. But never truly one of them. Erin, always eager to echo Linda's sentiments, chimed in. It's not personal, Rachel. It's just, some of us grew up in the business. It's in our blood. Literally. She laughed at her own pun, twirling her blonde hair. You can't teach that kind of legacy. I offered a polite chuckle. You're absolutely right, Erin. Legacy can't be taught. But some people still find ways to build it anyway. That shut her up for a beat. What none of them knew was that their precious empire, Callahan Industries, owed its very existence to someone they didn't consider real family. 5 years ago, their world almost fell apart. And I was the one who saved it. The drive back to my apartment in North Austin that night was quiet. I took the long route through the hill country, watching the outlines of live oaks pass by under the dim November moonlight. Linda's words echoed like a broken record, only real family. Funny how they forgot what real meant the moment the money showed up. My adoptive grandmother, Lucille Donovan, wasn't a Callahan by blood either. She was Cynthia's mother. But she had the kind of brain that saw the future while others were still clinging to the past. She invested quietly, tech startups in Austin during the early 2000s, pre-IPO giants, renewable energy portfolios when no one believed in them yet. She drove an old Ford, lived in a modest bungalow with wind chimes on the porch and wildflowers in the yard. No one suspected she was sitting on $80 million. Not even me. When Lucille passed away, her will stunned everyone. She left everything to me. Every penny. Every asset. Every holding. The only letter attached to the will read, Rachel, you have the eyes of a fox and the spine of a lion. You see people for who they are, and you've never begged to be loved. That's strength. Build something better. And don't tell them a damn thing until you're ready. I didn't. For 5 years, I let them underestimate me. It was safer that way. But back then, Callahan Industries was hemorrhaging money. Their automotive parts division was outdated. They'd failed to modernize and were buried in debt from trying to acquire smaller firms too fast. Publicly, they acted as if all was well. Privately, they were one bad quarter away from bankruptcy. I could have done anything with Lucille's money. Bought a vineyard in Napa. Vanished to Europe. Started a hedge fund. But I didn't. Instead, I called my financial advisor, Thomas Hawthorne, and said the words that changed everything. I want to invest in Callahan Industries. Quietly. Anonymously. Set up a holding company. No one can know it's me. Thomas was confused. You want to save a company that treats you like a +1 on the family invite list? Exactly, I replied. Because there's nothing more satisfying than watching someone feast at your table while they think you're the help. Through shell companies and blind trusts, I injected $80 million into Callahan Industries. It bought them new tech, cleared their debt, and gave them room to breathe. They called the mystery investor a godsend. Linda wrote a whole LinkedIn post praising the anonymous savior. Erin mentioned it in a podcast interview like she had personally made the deal happen. I just watched. Waited. Because I knew this day would come. The one where they sat at a Thanksgiving table, basking in the glow of a company they thought they owned, declaring me unworthy of it. Not knowing that I held 52% of their shares. Not knowing that I could crash their kingdom with a single signature. And now I was ready. I spent the weekend reviewing quarterly reports in my small but modern apartment overlooking downtown Austin. While Linda and the rest of the Callahans toasted their illusions, I was dissecting data, performance metrics, profit margins, ROI on R&D expansions I had funded, all through a web of trusts that no one in the family had ever traced. Callahan Industries was thriving. Their 3-year decline had reversed sharply after the anonymous investment came in. I didn't just stop the bleeding, I installed a new heart. And now it beat for me. My stake in the company had quietly grown over the last 5 years. Between aggressive reinvestment and acquiring secondary shares through one of the shell entities, I now controlled 52.3% of the business. I had the legal power to remove executives, dissolve contracts, sell divisions, and yes, pull every cent of my investment out if I chose. So, on Monday morning, I called Thomas. Are you ready? I asked, watching the Texas sun stream through my floor-to-ceiling window. I've been ready since the day they called you a charity case, Thomas replied without missing a beat. What's the plan? I want to initiate a complete withdrawal, I said. All capital, all growth, all dividends. Every dollar. I want them to feel the floor disappear. He paused on the other end. That will devastate them. You know that, right? I know, I said. I'm also done protecting people who only see value in bloodlines. He exhaled. Understood. I'll file the preliminary documents and notify the legal team. It'll take 45 to 60 days for a complete withdrawal, considering the size and layers of the structure. And when you send the formal notice to Callahan Industries, I added, make sure it's addressed from my holding company. And include my name. They'll find out you're the majority shareholder. That's the point. 3 days later, the email went out. To the executive board of Callahan Industries. Subject, Notice of Investment Withdrawal from Primary Capital Partner, Elmont Holdings LLC. The name Rachel Blake appeared at the bottom of the signature line. The silence after that email must have been deafening. That Friday, I received a message from Erin's assistant, disguised as polite inquiry. Hi Rachel. Hope you're well. I've been asked to confirm whether you're attending the upcoming emergency board meeting this Tuesday at 9 a.m. Since you're listed as majority stakeholder representative via Elmont Holdings, you are legally entitled to attend and vote. Just confirming your plans. I smiled at my screen. Confirmation sent. The following Tuesday, I arrived 20 minutes early at Callahan Tower, their sleek headquarters near Zilker Park. The same building where they once joked that only real Callahans get a badge. I wore navy blue, sharp, clean, professional. I carried a slim leather portfolio and nothing else. My black pumps clicked quietly on the polished stone floors as I stepped into the marble and glass lobby. The receptionist, a sweet woman named Kyra who had known me for years, blinked in surprise. Rachel? Are you here for someone? I'm here for the board meeting, I said evenly. She looked uncertain. That's only for executives and high-tier investors. I know. Could you let them know Rachel Blake, representative of Elmont Holdings and majority shareholder, has arrived? Her lips parted slightly. Of course. Before she could dial the phone, a loud voice cut through the lobby. Kyra, has anyone from Elmont Holdings returned our call? This is urgent. Linda's heels clacked into the room, followed by Todd, Erin, and Nathan, all looking like they hadn't slept in 3 days. Panic wore poorly on them. I turned to face them. Actually, Elmont Holdings is already here. Linda froze mid-stride. Her head snapped toward my voice, her jaw slackening as the color drained from her face. What are you talking about? She said. This is a crisis. Our biggest investor is pulling out. I'm aware, I said. Her voice sharpened. How could you possibly be aware? Because, I said, gently placing my portfolio on the reception desk. I am Elmont Holdings. Todd's face turned a mottled red. Erin's phone slipped from her hand. Nathan stared at me like I'd just revealed I was an alien sent to destroy their planet. No, Linda whispered. That's impossible. I opened the portfolio and handed her a notarized statement from Thomas's firm. It's not just possible. It's documented, verified, and fully legal. She read the letter with shaking hands. I watched her pride unravel word by word. Rachel Blake is the sole beneficiary and controlling member of Elmont Holdings, she read aloud, voice weakening. And Elmont Holdings controls 52.3% of Callahan Industries Class A shares. You've been working here. As a receptionist, Nathan stammered. You answer phones for a non-profit. You live modestly, drive a 10-year-old Subaru, shop at Target. I offered. Yes, Erin said. You don't live like someone who owns this. I smiled. That's the beauty of it. When people think you're insignificant, they show you exactly who they are. Linda's voice turned low and venomous. You planned this. 5 years ago, you needed a miracle. You got one. Now it's gone. But this will destroy us, Todd growled. We have contracts, orders. You mean the empire you built on someone else's money? A stranger's money? No. Linda snapped. A real Callahan would never do this to family. I leaned in slightly. You said I wasn't family. You said it at Thanksgiving, with full confidence and a full glass of Cabernet. Remember? Her mouth opened. Closed. No one spoke. You were right, I said softly. I'm not family. I'm the owner. The elevator ride to the 33rd floor was quiet. Linda stood beside me, shoulders rigid, her manicured fingers clenching the portfolio I'd handed her. Erin and Nathan followed behind, exchanging frantic whispers as Todd's phone buzzed non-stop with calls he didn't dare answer. The boardroom doors opened before we arrived. They were already waiting. 10 members of the executive team sat around the gleaming walnut table, each holding a printed agenda that had become utterly irrelevant 5 minutes ago. At the head of the table sat Charles Benedict, the company's longtime legal counsel, who looked like he'd aged 10 years over the weekend. Everyone stood when we entered. Everyone except me. I walked calmly to the head of the table and took a seat. The one that had always belonged to someone else. Now, it belonged to me. Let's begin, I said, flipping open my binder. We have a lot to cover. Linda sat to my left, lips pressed into a tight line. Todd took the seat opposite, looking like he wanted to lunge across the table and shake me awake from what he clearly believed was a nightmare. Miss Blake, Charles said cautiously, I'd like to confirm something before we proceed. Are you asserting that you are, in fact, the beneficial owner of Elmont Holdings, which controls the majority stake in Callahan Industries? Yes, I said simply. And you're initiating a full withdrawal of your capital investment? Correct. He nodded solemnly and turned to the others. There is no legal mechanism to stop this. She has full shareholder rights, including the authority to liquidate her holdings. Gasps rippled around the table. But surely, Nathan began, then stopped when Charles raised a hand. This meeting is no longer about quarterly planning, Charles said. It's about survival. Linda finally spoke, voice shaking. This can't be happening. We saved this company. We held it together. No, I said quietly. I did. You just took the credit. Erin stood abruptly. Rachel, this isn't like you. You're not this person. You mean I'm not supposed to have power, I replied. I'm supposed to stay in the background, be grateful for crumbs, smile through insults. But I stopped being that person the moment you told me I didn't belong. Todd slammed a fist on the table. Do you understand what this will do? You'll bankrupt your own family. My own family died 5 years ago, I said coldly. Her name was Lucille Donovan, and she left me everything because she saw what you never did. The room descended into chaos. Arguments erupted. Todd demanded emergency arbitration. Nathan accused me of corporate sabotage. Erin, trying to win favor, suggested a negotiation. And Linda sat frozen, staring down at the agenda sheet like it could offer her a way out. Charles finally raised his voice. Enough. Let's be clear, Miss Blake is well within her rights. Unless she voluntarily halts the withdrawal, This company has, at most, 6 weeks before the liquidity crisis hits. Linda turned slowly to me. Why are you doing this? I stared at her, letting the silence stretch. I spent my whole life watching you dismiss me. Every holiday, every conversation, every chance to show kindness, you chose exclusion. You built your identity on being better. Not smarter, not stronger, just more connected by blood. But blood doesn't build companies. Capital does. But we're your family. Erin cried. You only say that now, I said. When you thought I was nothing, you didn't hesitate to push me aside. And now that I own everything, suddenly you remember the word family? Linda's voice cracked. What do you want? There it was. The real question. What do I want? I repeated, almost smiling. Nothing. That's the part that must terrify you. You can't bargain with me, Linda. I don't want a title. I don't want your approval. I don't even want revenge. I leaned forward. I just want you to understand who really kept your empire alive. And now I want you to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. After the meeting, the family dispersed like broken marionettes, numb, shaken, aimless. I remained at the table as Charles quietly gathered the papers. They'll try to delay it, he said. They may even leak to the press. They can try, I replied. But by the time they finish drafting a statement, my shares will already be listed for transfer. He hesitated, then added, You're not doing this for money. You could have doubled your investment staying put. I'm doing this for dignity, I said. Something they never gave me. He gave a slight nod. Good luck, Miss Blake. I believe you've just made Texas corporate history. As he walked away, I looked out through the boardroom windows. The skyline of Austin shimmered in the late morning haze, bright and indifferent. Let them scramble. Let them beg. My decision was already made. The next morning, Thomas sent confirmation. The liquidation process had officially begun. All that remained now was the fallout. Linda tried to call me that afternoon. 4 times. I didn't answer. Erin texted me a paragraph full of emojis and emotional appeals. I blocked her number. Nathan emailed a bizarre mix of threats and apologies, followed by a subject line that simply read, Let's talk before it's too late. It already was. They thought being family would buy them loyalty. But they'd forgotten that loyalty has to be earned. And I was done giving mine away for free. By the time the weekend hit, the Callahan family had begun what I could only describe as their panic campaign. First came the spin attempts. Nathan leaked a memo to the senior staff, referring to me as an anonymous investor with a sudden vendetta. Linda began reaching out to board members individually, claiming this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd been emotionally manipulated by external parties. Todd floated the idea of re-evaluating Rachel's shares, as though my ownership could be argued out of existence by corporate semantics. It was both laughable and tragic. For a family so obsessed with appearances, they were unraveling like cheap thread. By Sunday, they'd started to realize something truly terrifying. No one wanted to help them. The same executives who once followed their every command now returned emails with vague replies or not at all. Callahan Industries had depended on my capital for 5 years, and when that capital announced its exit, so did the loyalty. Their empire hadn't been built on legacy. It had been built on borrowed time. That night, Thomas called with an update. They reached out through unofficial channels, he said. A third-party negotiator. What do they want? To stop the withdrawal. Or delay it. They're offering you a board seat, full public acknowledgement, even a restructuring of the leadership team. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. They're trying to buy me back with scraps. Not even the scraps, Thomas said. Just the illusion of respect. After 5 years of letting them mock you from across the dinner table. I assume we declined? Formally, yes. Informally, he hesitated. They don't know what to do, Rachel. I think they're scared. Genuinely. Good, I said. But after the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Late that night, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of red wine, staring at the granite countertop. I hadn't turned on the lights. The city outside flickered in reflections across the glass. My phone buzzed again. Linda Callahan. I watched the screen until it went black. She called back. Again. Finally, I answered, not with anger, not with strategy, just silence. Rachel? Her voice was strained. Not composed. Not the polished, steel-spined woman who once dismissed me with a raised brow. This was someone else. Someone, unraveling. I didn't know, she said, voice shaking. I had no idea it was you. If I had. You would have been nicer? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. No, she whispered. I mean yes. I mean, maybe I would have tried. But that's the point, isn't it? There it was. Honesty, painful and unvarnished. I treated you like an outsider because it made things easier, she continued. For me. For the others. If I acknowledged you fully, it meant questioning everything we built. And I wasn't strong enough for that. You still aren't, I said. Silence hung between us. Please don't do this, she said. Don't destroy what's left. Not like this. I'm not destroying anything, Linda. I just stopped protecting you. On Monday, Callahan Industries officially notified their employees of organizational uncertainty. The press caught wind of the shift, and by Tuesday, 3 articles were circulating online. The Austin Business Review published the most damning headline. Anonymous majority shareholder withdraws, Callahan Industries in tailspin. Inside sources leaked that the mysterious investor had been a woman, quiet but powerful. And then, someone from the legal team slipped my name to the press. By Wednesday, Rachel Blake was trending on LinkedIn. Some called me a business prodigy. Others, a vengeful insider. Most people didn't know what to make of me, an adopted daughter, long dismissed, now dismantling the very legacy she was once denied. I declined every interview. Let them speculate. That afternoon, Erin showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing there in oversized sunglasses and a faux humility expression she must have rehearsed in the mirror. Rachel, she breathed, can we talk? I doubt we have anything to say to each other. I was wrong, she said, pulling off her sunglasses. We were all wrong. I see that now. You didn't just invest, you saved us. The company, the jobs, our name. And we treated you like a servant. She paused. I need you to know something. I didn't respond. I let the moment hang. I used to be jealous of you, she said, surprising me. Because you didn't care what people thought. You just existed. And people liked you. You didn't try, you didn't scheme. You just lived. I spent my whole life trying to be impressive. You just were. I stared at her. That doesn't excuse what we did, she added quickly. But it's the truth. We were cruel. Because we were scared you'd surpass us. You were right, I said. I did. After she left, I sat on the couch and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions. Vindication. Rage. Sadness. Grief. Not for the company. For what could have been. For the version of the story where I was accepted, respected, trusted not out of obligation, but because I earned it. But they never gave me that chance. So I took my own. 2 days later, Thomas called again. Withdrawal timeline holding steady, he said. You'll be fully out in 38 days. And after that, I have 3 proposals for reinvestment. One of them's from a manufacturing firm in Seattle. Female-led. Transparency-driven. And they're looking for a partner, not a puppet. Sounds perfect. He paused. Rachel, this will mark the end. Once you pull out, they'll collapse. And no one's going to help them rebuild. I know. He hesitated. Do you care? I thought about it for a moment, then said, yes. But I won't stop. And I meant it. 35 days after I initiated the withdrawal, the pressure finally broke the surface. Callahan Industries filed for emergency financial protection. The headlines came fast and brutal. Texas manufacturing giant implodes after secret shareholder pulls funding. Adopted heiress or corporate assassin? The mysterious fall of the Callahan dynasty. Bloodlines mean nothing when you don't know who owns the table. By the end of the week, Todd had been ousted from his executive role. Erin stepped down voluntarily, though multiple insiders claimed she'd been forced. Nathan tried to hold on as VP of operations until vendors began pulling their contracts. No capital. No credibility. No future. The walls came down exactly the way they'd built them, fragile, full of pride, and too blind to see the cracks. Thomas invited me to his office the following Thursday to finalize the documents. As always, he was calm, meticulous, and dressed like someone who didn't feel the need to impress. "I don't think they believed you'd really go through with it," he said, passing the final papers across the polished oak desk. "That's always been the problem," I replied, signing the line above my name. "They never believed in me until I became a threat." The transaction took 15 minutes. With that, Callahan Industries no longer had me. And I no longer had them. "You've increased your personal wealth by just under $60 million, after taxes," Thomas said. "You now control 20% of MerrickWest Foundry, and your role as a board member is being fast-tracked. They're flying in next month to meet with you in person." MerrickWest wasn't just another company. It was everything Callahan wasn't. Transparent. Future-focused. Led by a CEO who came up from the factory floor, not a trust fund. I smiled. For once, I'm investing in people who don't need to pretend they're better than everyone else. Thomas poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed me one. "To legacy," he said. I clinked his glass. "To earned legacy," I corrected. That night, I received a message from Nathan. No greeting. Just a screenshot of the official bankruptcy petition. The file showed every number, every dollar lost, every asset under review. Then he wrote, "Are you happy now?" I stared at the message. I didn't respond. Because happy wasn't the right word. It was never about happiness. It was about truth. Days passed. The media storm intensified. Business magazines flooded my inbox with interview requests. A Netflix producer reached out asking if I'd sell the rights to my story. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in becoming their symbol of poetic justice. I was just done being their secret. And then, 1 week after the bankruptcy hit the press, I received a call that I didn't expect. Not from Linda. Not from Erin. Not even from Todd. From Cynthia. My adoptive mother. She hadn't said a word throughout this entire storm. Hadn't texted. Hadn't taken sides. And now, suddenly, her number flashed across my screen. I let it ring 3 times. Then I picked up. "Hi, Mom." Silence. Then a shaky breath. "I never wanted this," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Older. Tired. "I never wanted them to make you feel like less. But you let them," I said. "I did." A pause. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared that if I defended you, they'd push me out too. That I'd lose what little place I had in the Callahan world. And now, I've already lost it." I didn't speak. I wanted to hear where she would take this. "I was a coward, Rachel," she said, barely whispering. "And I know you didn't do this for revenge. I know it. Because if you had, you would have told them who you were before you pulled the trigger." Another long pause. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. But I'm proud of you. I've always been proud. Even when I didn't say it." Tears surprised me. I blinked them back, silent. "You don't have to forgive me," she added. "I just wanted you to know." And then she hung up. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up outside my apartment. A courier delivered a box. Inside, a leather-bound journal with my name engraved in gold foil, a sealed letter, and a framed photo I'd never seen before, me at age 11, in a white dress, sitting between Lucille and Cynthia at some forgotten holiday dinner. I opened the letter slowly. It was from Lucille. Thomas must have held it back until the withdrawal finalized. "Rachel, if you're reading this, you've done what I always knew you would. You walked into a room they tried to keep you out of and claimed it for yourself. You never needed a seat at their table. You were always meant to build your own. But let me leave you with this: never become them. Never forget the difference between power and worth. One can be taken. The other lives inside you forever. L." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I closed the box and placed it on the shelf near my desk. I wouldn't become them. Not even now. Especially now. On Monday, I flew to Seattle for my first meeting with MerrickWest Foundry. The CEO, Julia Merrick, met me in the lobby of their headquarters, her handshake firm and her smile unapologetic. "We've read everything about you," she said. "And still, we don't know who you are." "Good," I said. "That means I've been doing things right." She laughed. "Come on. Let's talk about the future." And just like that, I stepped into a building that didn't ask me to prove I belonged. 2 weeks after I joined the board at MerrickWest Foundry, My name had officially disappeared from the day-to-day conversations swirling around Callahan Industries. It was as if I had been surgically removed from their narrative. Not a villain. Not a hero. Just silence. Which was fine. Preferred, actually. I hadn't set out to become anything for them. But silence has weight. And absence leaves outlines. The storm I'd unleashed hadn't just toppled a corporation, it had rearranged lives. On a rainy Thursday morning, my assistant forwarded me an urgent message from one of my old contacts in Austin. Have you seen the local business journal? You should. Page 1. I opened the link and stared at the headline. Callahan matriarch in ICU following collapse of family empire. Linda. A heart attack. Sudden. Stress-induced. Complicated by pre-existing conditions no one in the family had ever talked about, because appearances mattered more than checkups. According to the article, she'd been hospitalized in critical condition the night the board filed for bankruptcy. I sat motionless, the article glowing on my screen. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel regret. I felt something I couldn't name. Heavy. Human. The next evening, Erin called. I didn't answer the first time. Or the second. By the third, I gave in. Rachel, she said immediately, her voice raw, like she hadn't slept in days. She's still unconscious. The doctors aren't sure she'll wake up. Silence stretched. I'm not asking you to forgive us, she added. I just thought you should know. She kept a photo of you on her desk. That stopped me. What? A Thanksgiving photo. One of the early ones. You're standing at the end of the table. You were probably 14. Wearing that hideous sunflower dress you used to love. I remembered the dress. And the way Linda had mocked it. I never knew she kept that, I said quietly. She didn't keep much. But she kept that. I sat on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed to my ear, trying to align this version of Linda with the one I'd battled for years. She didn't hate you, Erin said. She hated what she didn't understand. And you scared her. I almost asked why. But I already knew. 3 days later, I flew back to Austin. I didn't tell anyone. Not Thomas. Not Cynthia. Not the press. I just booked a red-eye and landed in the city where it all began. I didn't go to the hospital. Not at first. I went to the ruins of what used to be Callahan Tower. The glass was still intact. The building hadn't physically collapsed. But the energy was different. Hollow. The revolving doors spun slower. The reception desk was unmanned. The security guard barely looked up when I entered. On the 33rd floor, the boardroom was locked. A sign read, "This space is temporarily closed." Poetic. I walked to the window and looked out over the skyline. The city hadn't noticed the fall of a dynasty. Austin was still growing, still building, still alive. Callahan was a story. Not a landmark. Not anymore. That night, I went to the hospital. Erin met me in the lobby. She didn't cry or hug me or make a dramatic scene. She just said, "She's in 7B, and walked away. The room was quiet. Machines beeped softly. Linda lay still, pale and small under layers of white. For a woman who once commanded entire rooms with a look, she looked unfinished. Incomplete. I didn't want this, I said aloud, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. I sat in the chair beside her bed and stared at the 4 lines. The fragility of all of it. The body. The empire. The ego. I never needed your love, I whispered. But I wanted your respect. A soft breath escaped her lips. For a moment, I thought she might wake. But she didn't. I left before sunrise. The air was cool, Texas autumn finally showing up like it always did, too late, too sudden. I walked past the hospital chapel, where someone had left a candle burning. And for the first time since this began, I prayed. Not for Linda. Not for myself. For the people we could have been. The next week, Merrick West announced its expansion into Central Texas. We were opening a new facility, ironically, just 15 minutes from where Callahan Industries had stood. I oversaw the project, hired dozens of former Callahan employees, and implemented policies that rewarded merit, not blood. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Julia Merrick introduced me. This facility stands not just on steel and concrete, but on courage. The kind that walks away from where it's not wanted and builds something better from scratch. Please welcome the woman who made this possible, Rachel Blake. The applause was real. Earned. And as I looked out at the crowd, engineers, administrators, interns, I didn't feel like an outsider anymore. I felt home. That night, I got a final message from Todd Callahan. A single sentence. We didn't know how to value you until it was too late. I didn't respond. Some truths speak for themselves. A month after the MerrickWest launch, I found myself back in Denver, sitting on the balcony of my new townhome, watching a snow-dusted skyline glitter beneath a cold November moon. No glass towers. No backroom deals. Just the sharp, silent clarity of winter. The company was thriving. My stake was now 22%, and Julia Merrick had officially nominated me to lead the Investment Ethics Committee, something she said was long overdue in corporate spaces. I no longer introduced myself as just an investor. I had become a builder. Not of empires, but of spaces where people like me wouldn't be asked to prove their worth before being seen. One evening, after a board meeting, I received a call from Cynthia. Your grandmother's estate, she said. There's one last piece. She was talking about Lucille's Lake Cottage in Marble Falls, tucked between limestone hills and a reservoir that shimmered like spilled silver. I'd visited it only once as a teenager. Back then, it had felt like another place I didn't quite belong. She left a letter, Cynthia said, but only to be opened when the house changes ownership. The next weekend, I drove out. The cottage was simple. Weathered wood siding, red roof tiles faded to dusty rose. The mailbox still said Donovan. I opened the creaky front door and stepped inside. Dust swirled in the late sunlight, dancing like ghosts in the air. On the kitchen counter sat a sealed envelope. My name was on it. Rachel. This house is yours now. But don't think of it as a gift. Think of it as a seed. Build something here. Not a company. Not a defense. Something real. Something with roots. The world didn't know what to do with girls like you. But maybe it will, someday. Help build that world. L. I stood in the quiet house, letter in hand, and something broke open inside me, not pain, not triumph, but peace. 2 months later, I returned to Austin. Not to visit the ruins, but to open something new. The Donovan Center for Ethical Innovation. Part business incubator, part leadership academy, part community think tank. We offered training for first-gen entrepreneurs, seed funding for women-led startups, and boardroom literacy for people who'd never even been invited into the room. The first plaque went up in the lobby. It didn't say Callahan. It didn't say Revenge. It said, built by those they underestimated. Founder, Rachel Blake. On the first day of winter, Erin showed up at the center. She didn't ask to see the facility. She didn't wear sunglasses or fake apologies. She just stood in the entrance, holding a small cardboard box. I found this in Mom's things, she said. She passed 3 weeks ago. Peacefully. I thought, you should have it. Inside the box, letters, photos, and one thing I never expected to see. A necklace. Simple gold. A tiny pendant engraved with a sunflower. I hadn't worn that dress since I was 14. But somehow, Linda had kept the necklace. She never said it out loud, Erin whispered, eyes glassy, but I think she knew. Toward the end. That she got it wrong. I nodded. Words weren't needed. Some griefs are wordless. So are some forgivenesses. Erin left the box. I placed it in my office. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That spring, I stood on a stage at a leadership conference in Chicago. I had been invited to give the keynote. A room full of investors, executives, and founders waited quietly. I began not with statistics, but with truth. I was adopted into a family that never saw me as more than a footnote, I said. I built their future in secret. And when they told me I didn't belong, I showed them who had been holding the walls up all along. But this story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. It's about understanding that power isn't about bloodlines or boardrooms. It's about knowing your worth long before anyone else sees it and acting like it. The crowd stood when I finished. Not for who I had defeated, but for what I had become. That night, alone in my hotel room, I sat on the bed and looked out at the glowing city. My phone buzzed. A new message. From an unknown number. I was one of the interns at Callahan. You probably never noticed me. But I noticed you. And when you sat at that table after everything, I realized I didn't need permission to exist anymore. Thank you. I smiled. Not because it made everything worth it, but because it reminded me. We build the future quietly, sometimes. And not every war needs fire to end in victory. Final note. The Callahan family's legacy faded into quiet chapters of business case studies and local folklore. They were never reviled. Just forgotten. But my name, Rachel Blake, became more than a signature on a document. It became a signal. That power, once lost or denied, can still be reclaimed. Not to destroy, but to create. And that sometimes the most powerful inheritance isn't money or legacy. It's the knowledge that you don't have to ask for a seat at the table. Because you can build your own. And invite others in.